Oh, you're slick. You investors in hate. You Saddams and you Bushes. You Bin Ladens and snakes. You billionaire bullies. You're a globalized curse. You put war on the masses and then you clean out the purse.
Greetings and welcome to Heroes and Patriots. This program highlights national security, intelligence, and foreign policy. Today is Thursday, May 7th, 2026, and we are streaming live from Northern California. Views and opinions expressed are those of our speakers today and not necessarily those of the board, staff, underwriters, and membership. Equal time will be made available for differing viewpoints. Hello, I'm Mary Massey in Northern California, and co-host John SAKOWICZ joins us from Florida. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Mary, and good morning to our audience in our broadcast area of Northern California and to our audience listening to the live web stream. Speaking to you from my home in Palm Beach, I'm hoping that during this program, someone will ask me about Trump's recent visit on May Day, May 1st, to Palm Beach. He visited the Villages, a retirement community stretched out over 3 counties in central Florida of 88,000 people. It was so bizarre, I thought I had entered into, I don't know, an alternate universe. That's all I can say.
You're on a bad trip, right? You're on a bad trip.
Yeah, I'll talk about it if time permits. But he also, more importantly, he spoke later in the day to a very well-heeled group of 600 people at the Kravis Center at something known as the Forum Club. Mm-hmm. And it's clear what Trump's next moves are after his presidency. So again, if time permits, I'd like to talk about that.
Yeah, maybe we could just bring that up on the half hour and take a break. Did you have anything else top of the hour or?
Yeah, I want to acknowledge the death of my friend Norman Duvall, 3-term supervisor in Mendocino County. I really loved the guy. He progressive guy through and through, a very accomplished mariner who delivered supplies to the American Indian movement on Alcatraz Island back when they had occupied that place. He was one of my political mentors, reached out to me when I first moved here as a young employee of the sheriff's office and kind of mentored me in politics and was my friend and was a friend to my sons who got them interested in the ocean-going life, got them internships abroad, Project Kaise, that was cleaning up the plastic vortex in the North Central Pacific, supported their applications, congressional nominations to the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, and I don't think my sons would be in their careers leading to tugboat captains for the Navy had it not been for Norman Duvall. He was just a great guy. He was just a great guy.
Well, we're sorry for the loss to the community for sure. I want to tell listeners that you can call in to speak with our guest today. And that number to call is 707-923-3911. Our engineer today is Rob. He will take your call and add you into our conversation. And we do hope that folks will call in and about our, with respect to our topic today. So joining us now from Washington, D.C. is Sam Rosenthal. Mr. Rosenthal is the political director at RootsAction. We've had RootsAction, Norman Solomon and other members, Jeff Cohen, on the program before. He serves on the Democratic Socialists of America's National Electoral Committee. And there's a lot going on throughout the country with voter rights and so forth. So we might want to touch on that. He was formerly a staffer at Our Revolution, and previously he served as the political director at Our Revolution. Sam Rosenthal, welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
It's so great to have you. There's so much going on in our country with respect to voters' rights and Republican versus Democrat and all the hoopla over the elections. We're now in the midterms. I wondered if you would just start by reminding our listeners about RootsAction, how it began, how it operates, and its mission.
Sure. RootsAction is a progressive political organization. We're devoted to an inside-outside game, so we interact with the Democratic Party, and we also interact with the grassroots, with activists, and we try to advance progressive change in the United States, particularly in the areas of foreign policy, democracy reform, and media reform. And we have been an active group for the last 2 decades. We were founded by Norman Solomon and Jeff Cohen, and we have been going strong since then. So that's a bit about the organization, and I'm happy to talk too about some of our more current campaigns.
Right, and you serve as political director. What does that entail? How do you interface with the communities that you're in?
A lot of my job is to sort of survey what's happening politically on the left, in the progressive movement, and think about where RootsAction can plug in, what opportunities we can use, and also to look at things like electoral support, again, interactions with the Democratic Party and leadership, with the DNC, which I'm sure we'll talk more about,
Right.
And to sort of try to channel what's happening at the grassroots into action at the national level.
And
Sam, I was going to ask you to plug Norman's most recent book. As soon as I heard about it, I ordered it. Basically, how the Democrats lost the last presidential election, why Trump won, and what we need to do as Democrats to turn things around. I thought the book was brilliant. We had Norman on the show to talk about the book, but I thought you might plug it one more time.
Oh, sure. Norman Solomon, our co-national director. The book is called The Blue Road to Trump Hell, I believe. And it's basically a story about, Norman could do a better job describing it, I'm sure, but it's a story about how corporate Democrats and the policies they advanced paved the way not just for Trump himself, but for the MAGA movement more broadly, and created a niche on the right for this discontent about things like offshoring of jobs, neoliberal austerity politics, that niche was filled by demagoguery and by right populism. And the Democrats left that lane open and allowed the MAGA movement and Trump to be successful in capturing a lot of the momentum in the voters that more populist-facing, more a Democratic Party more attuned to the needs of the working class may have been able to stop them from capturing.
And is this the phenomenon that occurred in his first election, or are you speaking now to when he was reelected?
That's a good question. I think that this was certainly what happened in the first election. I think it's pretty well documented that there were people across the political spectrum, voters in this country, who felt broad discontent with the direction the country was heading, and unhappy with their personal circumstances, and this feeling that the American dream was not what it had promised, that they had worked hard, that they had tried to save money, they had tried to obtain things like home ownership and sending their kids to school and all these things that you're told to do, and that the returns to that were really diminishing. And I think that that's a lot the story of 2016, that having a candidate in Hillary Clinton who said things are pretty good and we're just going to keep on this track where things continue to be good was not appealing to most voters, and having a candidate as gruff and indecorous as Donald Trump was, but who said we can tear the whole system down, was very appealing to folks. 2024 is a different story, I think, and this is maybe sort of segues into what RootsAction is active in at the moment. But I think that it's a slightly more complex picture, and in some ways a more shocking loss for the Democratic Party, because they learned their lesson once already with Donald Trump, that saying to voters, we actually think things are pretty good, and we think that you shouldn't complain so much about the economy, about your job prospects, about the cost of higher education, about the cost of healthcare, about the cost of groceries, is not really a winning message. And that when people are upset about those things, you've got to speak to that upset, and you've got to speak to why is it that people feel discontent with life in this country right now? Why is it that so many people feel like they're struggling day by day? And that's to say nothing of the foreign policy that the last administration upheld, which we feel was a turnoff to large segments of the base the Democrats needed, young people, voters of color, especially Muslim Americans, Arab Americans. So this has been part of the reason why we have been encouraging the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, to release the autopsy report that they compiled after Kamala Harris's 2024 loss. We know that a report exists, and we know that some inside the DNC and maybe outside the DNC have seen the report, but uncharacteristically, unlike in years past, the DNC has not released this report publicly. So in effect, it's saying,
that? Can you
sure,
share that report? Because that would be of interest to our listeners, and maybe tell us where we need to go now.
Sure. So RootsAction has had a campaign for the last year or so calling on Chair Ken Martin, who's the relatively new chair of the DNC, to release this autopsy report, as it's often known, which we know exists. This isn't, something that we're calling for the DNC to compile or to write. The report already exists. It's sitting somewhere at DNC headquarters. And we think that this is sort of a bare minimum for a party that wants to regain legitimacy with voters, that wants to appear to be a party that's fighting Trumpism, that's fighting the right in this country, that there would be some kind of open reflection on the lessons learned from what was effectively an electoral blowout. I mean, the popular vote was close again, but this was not, from an electoral college standpoint, this was not a close election.
Right.
And the Democrats were effectively non-competitive in all the states they needed to win. I mean, they didn't come close to winning this election. And this is against someone who's been the most unpopular president of the modern era. So it's really a wipeout loss, and we think, merits a period of deep reflection and of public reflection to say, what went wrong? How did we fail you, the voters? How did we fail constituents? How did we fail the American public? But instead, what we've seen from the DNC is the Chair Martin has said, we need to move forward. We need to not dwell in the past. We need to move forward. Now, that sounds good on its face, right? Of course, we want to be looking forward. We want to be thinking about the midterms and presidentials in 2028. But we need to first learn the lessons of the past. What went wrong in 2024? If we can't answer that question, how can we possibly move forward and expect success in the future? And that's what we've been saying at RootsAction.
Does Chair Martin have the sole vote on whether it's released or not? How come? I mean, what do you think they're hiding or embarrassed about?
I don't think he has the sole vote. I think he's probably the loudest voice in the conversation, I would say. But if he were willing, if he were pushing this, I don't think he would meet much resistance. As to what's in the report, we can only speculate because we don't know. Right. What we've done at RootsAction is we've written our own independent autopsy where we point to several factors that we think contributed to the Democrats' loss. We actually just sent that autopsy report to 400 or so people who are in the DNC. That's about 90% of the DNC. And we emailed that report to them earlier this week. So they all have it in their inboxes if they want to take a look and reflect on what we feel are some of the main factors which led to Kamala Harris's loss. And just very briefly, those are, first, there are nearly 7 million fewer people voted for Kamala Harris than voted for Joe Biden in 2020. Wow. So to us, that's a problem with voter turnout. That's a problem with voter enthusiasm and disenchantment. There's also the question of Kamala Harris's pivot to the center. We thought that campaigning with people like Liz Cheney, who is not a broadly well-liked political figure, was a mistake, and that instead this should have been an election that strove to drive out base turnout, that we should have been exciting the Democratic base instead of pivoting to the swing voters, moderates in the center, because it was clear that what happened is the MAGA base turned out enthusiastically, and the Democratic base did not turn out enthusiastically. Then you have to look at particular demographics where we saw huge voter dropout, especially among younger voters. It's not that they voted for Trump, they just did not vote. They stayed home. So it's not that Trump won them over, it's that no one was appealing. And for us, you then have to look at Joe Biden's facilitation of Israel's genocide in Gaza and whether that turned off young voters who overwhelmingly, upwards of 80%, feel that the U.S. should stop arming Israel. So this is a party that was completely out of step with the majority of Democrats now, by the way, not just young Democrats, but especially young Democrats who are totally disenchanted. And then finally, we have to look again at the way Joe Biden, after saying he would be a bridge president, decided he was going to run for re-election, bowed out at the last minute, and basically handicapped the party and made it impossible for the party to do what we thought they should have done, which was to have a normal primary nominating process for Joe Biden to say, I'm not going to seek re-election, for there to be a normal primary nominating process, whereby there could have been Democratic consensus around who the nominee was, which we think would have driven enthusiasm for that person up far more. I mean, this was an effective coronation of Kamala Harris, who did not do well in the 2020 primary, was not seen as someone who had a broad base of support, and was basically, thrust into the president's chair in a way that was totally non-democratic. So those are some of the top factors we point to.
Pick up on that because John and I were talking about how there was no convention and process and so forth. She was just picked. That's it. We do have a caller, Sam. Caller, if you're listening, go ahead with your question, and then we'll circle back.
Oh, thank you so much, because I just wanted to say, Mr. Rosenthal, that I think you've hit all the lessons learned, and my frustration with the Democratic Party is that it does not present a vision. To the credit of the Republicans, they had their vision for 2025, which they worked on for years, and it was coherent to their base. It covered many points that everybody cared about in their base, and where are the Democrats with their vision? So my feeling is, yes, there's a postmortem, there's everything, but I'm not interested in that now, and I'm a historian. I just want to see us move forward to have a way of getting a big umbrella, because it's not just a progressive party, it is a party with people who care about the centrist perspective. So how at RootsAction are you working to promote a vision for the Democratic Party that can actually reach voters? And then the corollary is, who is the best candidate for presenting that vision that's not already got there's no one with a really national base. So who are we going to find? And how are we going to promote them?
Thank you, caller. Sam, there's a lot there. Where would you like to begin?
Sure. Let me just pick up a few threads there. And, it's a great question, and I think a really pertinent question. First, I completely agree with the point about the Democratic Party lacking a vision. I don't think that there is coherent politics and policy that we hear from party leadership right now. I think there are some in the party who are very good about defining what the Democratic Party could be about, but that has largely not been picked up by leadership. For RootsAction, one of the root causes of that is that we see a real conflict between the consultant corporate class of the Democratic Party and the grassroots base of the Democratic Party, which are increasingly misaligned with each other. And this isn't me saying this is borne out by polling. So Democratic voters, people who vote in Democratic primaries who are registered Democrats, they want things like single-payer health care. They want things like an end in weapons shipments to Israel, to countries abroad in general. They want an acknowledgement of the climate crisis and a greening of the electrical grid. They want regulation of AI. I mean, these are big, big issues that lots of people in the party want. And we don't see the Democrats picking these up as base issues as sort of the core platform of the party, which is what we think it should be. We're a progressive organization. We want progressive candidates in there. I agree that the party is a Big Tent party, but I would say that even within the Big Tent, there's broad agreement that the things I just talked about are the policies people want to see. So while they might dither a bit on, the exact language of these policies, broadly speaking, this is a vision of the future that we want to see the party adopt. it's aligned with what voters are telling them they want to see, but we still haven't seen party leaders pick it up. And I think that's where you see the Democratic Party getting into trouble with messaging.
It's 20 minutes past the hour. 707-923-3911 is the number to call. We have another call, Sam. We're going to take that right now. Caller, if you're listening, go ahead with your question.
Good morning, RootsAction. I wanted to remind you, please, of the importance of not using the term people of color. It's a pejorative term, especially for a party of the people, a progressive we the people party. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, caller. Sam, do you have any thoughts on that?
It's a term I hear a lot right now in sort of activists and left spaces. I think it's kind of in the vernacular. So that's the term, one of the terms we use.
I want to circle back to your autopsy and one of the questions that came from our first caller about an emerging candidate who has a national following. Do you have anybody? Do you want to share anybody in the pipeline? What is that looking like?
I think that the field is starting to develop. There are still a lot of questions on the left. It's not clear to me yet that we have our single flag bearer who will be rallying behind. I think the names you hear a lot are Ro Khanna, who's been very outspoken recently on pro-regulation issues. He's been very good about keeping the Epstein issue, which I think is a really important issue that is cross-cutting, that reaches across the aisle. He's been critical to keeping that issue in headlines as much as he can, and has been very good on foreign policy lately. So it seems like he's certainly someone who's thinking about running in the progressive lane. The other big question is whether AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, will think about throwing her hat in the ring this round. I'm not sure. I don't know. Haven't spoken to anyone in her camp who knows, but those seem to be the names on the kind of progressive side. Then you have folks like Chris Murphy, Chris Van Hollen, who I think are running as sort of between the moderate and progressive wings of the party, somewhere in that space. And they have their strengths. Van Hollen has been very good on foreign policy lately. Murphy's been good on domestic policy, gun control, and so on. And so they'll each have lanes that they occupy. But I just think it's a bit too early to know yet. We don't know what the rest of the field is going to look like. I mean, you have people like Gavin Newsom, who are, he's certainly running. He'll be a formidable fundraiser. I'm not actually sure how much support he'll get once the rubber meets the road and it's time for voters to, express how they feel in primaries. I think he's a very California coded person. Yeah. He's very slick. I'm not sure that that's going to play with the base. So we're not, I guess the short of it is we're not ready yet to support an individual person. We want to see who's out there.
You're listening to Heroes and Patriots, coming to you live out of Northern California. The number to call, 707-923-3911. Guess we have another caller. Caller, if you're listening, go ahead with your question.
Hi, it seems clear to me that the Democratic Party has been, bought up. So our government is bought by the rich. And so my question to you is, why don't we start a campaign? I mean, all the topics that you described as far as the progressive sort of platform, I think that would be very enticing both to, leftists as well as a lot of people on the right. Why don't, instead of looking to the Democratic leadership to and trying to push them to take us there, why don't we create our own candidate and do an internet-based campaign and do it from the bottom up? Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, caller. I was going to ask the caller if he had someone in mind that he was interested in, but I'm not sure he's still with us. Sam, your thoughts?
Well, so first, let me just speak to the first point, which is I completely agree with the caller that the influence of big money in politics in general, but in the Democratic Party, that's what we're focused on, is far too significant. And this is one of the reasons why we've also been pushing Chair Martin, along with some others, to get dark money out of Democratic primaries. We've seen a lot of spending in Democratic primaries over the last few years, particularly from the AIPAC lobby, that's the Israel Right or Wrong lobby, and increasingly now from crypto and AI lobbies, putting their thumb on the scale and spending record amounts, millions and millions of dollars in Democratic primaries to unseat progressive candidates or to stop progressive candidates from getting the nomination. So I completely agree with the caller on that basis, that we need to do everything we can to erode the influence that a tiny number of billionaires and centimillionaires have in our elections, and that corporations have in our elections. It's a total corruption of the democratic process, and we're pushing on as many fronts as we can to turn the tide back on that. As to the question of another party or a different candidate, I just think that we live in a duopolistic political system right now in this country. I wish that we had a parliamentary system or something like that. That would be great. I probably would be in a different party, not the Democratic Party. But the reality is that we have not had a candidate from a non-major party win a significant election in which they can command any type of power in decades. And you need to be realistic as good activists, as good organizers, about the opportunity structure. And right now, the opportunity structure is that the person who wins the presidency is going to either have an R or a D next to their name. And the only influence we have right now, I think, is who is that person with the D next to their name?
Right.
And how can we influence the outcome of those primaries so that we try to get the best possible person into that role?
Sam and John, we have another caller. Caller, if you're listening, go ahead with your question for Sam Rosenthal.
Hello. Thank you very much for talking about this topic. It's more of just sort of a statement, which is you brought up Ro Khanna, and as someone who's been exceptionally frustrated with the Democratic Party for years, he's the only Democrat I would vote for who's at all in the running or talked about. I think if it was Ro Khanna versus any normal Republican, he would absolutely win, because an earlier caller alluded to the fact that there are a lot of people on the right who are very distrustful of, the CIA and our foreign policy, and a sort of a populist message which was promising concrete material benefits to all people would be very successful. And I think, Ro Khanna versus Thomas Massey might be very good for the nation as far as, people reaching across and working on the Epstein issue. And as much as we can talk about the Epstein class and how they're synonymous with big donors and the corporate control of our media and government, the better we will be in the long term. So I just wanted to put that out there. And also on the local election, I think we have an opportunity to tell the Democrats that business as usual is not appropriate. And I very strongly support Rose Lee over Jared Huffman as the potential congressperson. And if it became a runoff between Rose Lee and Jared Huffman instead of Jared Huffman and whoever the Republican is, then I'm pretty sure that with a well-crafted message, enough conservatives would be voting for Rose Lee that we would have some meaningful change in Congress. And I was curious what you thought about that as a strategy. And I'll take my answer off the air.
Thank you, caller. Good points. Sam, are you familiar with Rose Lee? Jared Huffman, obviously.
Yes, we're watching the race. We've sent emails supportive of Rose into the district, and we are completely supportive of this strategy in general. A lot of RootsAction as an organization and myself independently, this has been a strategy that we've pursued for a long time. We want more progressives to run in primary elections to challenge corporatist Democrats. And I just want to emphasize a point I make a lot. It doesn't have to be for Congress. You can run for lots and lots of seats in local government and state government. There are a lot of people who are sitting on their seats who have to go through a primary election every year in very sleepy districts, and they might not be used to running against opposition. If you are a progressive listening to this and you think you have better ideas than your town council person or city council person, than your mayor, than a state representative, you should consider running in a primary against them. Some of these seats can be won with not too many votes, not too much fundraising. It's manageable. Congress is a tough race. I think people want to run for Congress because there's a lot of glory there, but it's best built up to, in my opinion. Every once in a while, you'll get an AOC or a flash on the pan, but I just think it's great to run in primaries against centrist Democrats who are not listening to their constituents. But it's really important also to, think about if that's which seat is the right lift for you, given where you are right now. But I completely encourage folks to do this. And then, I'll just say, I think the caller's right that we're still living in a populist moment. Candidates like, sitting reps like Congressman Khanna, who are going to speak to these issues, speak to voters' anger with the billionaire class and things like the Epstein scandal, which in other countries is an enormous scandal. In this country, it gets so little airtime because it is so pernicious and dangerous to the people who are in charge of this country right now, but has, in the UK and other places, has been in an enormous headline dominating scandal. I think that candidates, representatives, electeds who are willing to channel that anger and able to do it in a way that's convincing are going to be still very potent, popular candidates going forward.
It's 31 minutes past the hour. You're listening to Heroes and Patriots. John, I think you have a question. Thanks for being
I have a comment. And by the way, I've done less talking on this show than I think I ever had in 20 years of radio. I love you. I love you, Sam. You're so knowledgeable. You're so smart. And so is our audience, our listening audience. Yeah. Every call that we received has been well-informed, intelligent, well-considered. I'm just so happy to be doing this show on KMUD radio, which is why I'm a member, not just a programmer, but a member.
Me too.
And I hope everyone out there in radio land is a member too. So I wanted to make one comment and then throw out a factoid and then kind of pivot, if I may. So the comment I had was the listener calling about people of color. I think we were a little patronizing. One thing I learned when I worked in law enforcement for the Mendocino County Sheriff's Office is that you really can't lump all people of color together as people of color. Blacks, the Black community is very distinct from the Latino community. The Latino community, even among themselves, have very sharp divisions. Mexican Americans, Central Americans here, South Americans, even people of Mexican descent. I knew a lot of people who did identify themselves as Azteca, as indigenous people of Mexico. Asians Americans want to be considered separate and distinct. So I just wanted to acknowledge to that listener that yes, there's at least me personally have a problem with people of color as a bandied about term. And in law enforcement, I was always respectful of the individual and the individual communities that the person I was dealing with came from. So that's my comment. My second comment is about Rose Penelope Yee and Jared Huffman. We know both candidates well. Jared Huffman gave congressional nominations to both my sons, to military academies. We were once friends until Gaza, until he started voting for unrestricted military aid to Israel, 1,000-pound bombs, white phosphorus bombs, cluster bombs. There was nothing that he wouldn't vote for because Jared was afraid of AIPAC. He was afraid of the Israeli lobby, singling him out in a contested primary. I've spoken to Rose Penelope Yee, a young Filipino woman, very well spoken. We can't make endorsements on the show, and those are the rules of public radio. But I'm just throwing it out there. I would also say that we invited Norman Solomon and Jared Huffman to square off on the whole military aid to Israel issue. And they initially agreed, and then Jared Huffman backed out at the last minute. So I'm just throwing that out there as facts. The one thing I'd like to do is pivot, if I may, to California politics. We've been talking a lot about national politics. And my personal belief is that California voters could cast the deciding votes this November that could flip control of the U.S. House. And if Democrats win the majority in the House, they could block President Trump's legislative agenda. They could hold congressional hearings as committee chairs and launch investigations like into the Epstein files. They could even vote for another impeachment. And that I believe that the road to the House majority runs right through California. Democrats have been on an offense after voters last year approved new congressional maps that in our state forced 9 incumbent Republicans into more left-leaning districts. 3 are designed to flip, and 2 others favor Democrats. Most national investment in political action committees focus on the 2 remaining toss-up races, one in the Central Valley and one in San Diego. So I was wondering if Sam could talk about those 9 races and how we could win them if we wanted to flip the majority in the House.
Sure. I'm not as familiar with California politics as probably you all are. I look at politics all over the country, so I'm not always as plugged in individually to California. But I think in general, what the party needs here is a blue wave election. The House is within reach. They can win it. But there needs to be an upswell in enthusiasm from voters across the country. In California and in other states, there are, races in Arizona and Pennsylvania and Michigan and so on that are going to be also determinative, in places like Iowa, which voted for President Trump last election. So you're going to need to see a groundswell of enthusiasm, and you're going to need to see high turnout from the Democratic base. This was exactly the problem in the last even year election we had in the presidential, was that we had low turnout from the base. So I think this sort of harkens back to what we were talking about earlier in the hour, but what are you telling voters you're going to do for them? And, you just listed a bunch of things that it would be great for Democrats to do if they regain control of the House. It would be a critical check on Trumpism. And, he is an increasingly deranged president. I think we've seen it gets more every day that he's in office. It gets more dangerous, more destabilized. There's more of a likelihood of something truly catastrophic happening. I mean, in the existential sense. And so I think it's really important that there's a check on him as soon as possible, because his cabinet, members of the Republican Party, are completely handcuffed and incapable of doing anything. So you've got to figure out how to drive out your base. And I think, again, we're just, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but we want to see popular policy at the top of the ticket. We want to see candidates who are not playing it safe, who are not listening so much to what the consultant class tells them, who are going to be straight with voters about, yes, I think it's a bad idea that so many of our American tax dollars are going to sending weapons to another country that then uses them to kill civilians. Right. We think that it's bad that we are giving, we're having, tax giveaways to giant AI corporations, that we are telling people, well, you've just got to deal with a data center in your backyard. This is something that the party is opposed to. And a little bit, the party has to start to adopt this attitude of consequences be damned when it comes to big donors and dark money, because if it's not willing to at least pivot away from the influence that those groups have had somewhat, it's going to be stuck in this middle ground forever, where it can't promulgate popular policy because the donor class will become really upset, but it can't turn around and say, well, we're doing AI deregulation. We're going to, keep sending weapons abroad. We're not going to do anything about student debt or your healthcare, because, of course, no one would vote for the Democratic Party in that case. So they've got to figure out how they're going to build good messaging that's going to drive voters out in November. People hate Donald Trump. That's in the bag. Voters hate Donald Trump. Democratic voters really hate Donald Trump, but it's not enough. We've seen it too many times. It's not enough to just say, vote against Trump, vote against Trump. You've got to tell people what they're voting for, not just that they're voting against Trump.
Yeah, in one of these California races I was referring to, in particular, the one in the Central Valley, Congressional District 22, the counties of Fresno, Kings, Tulare, and Kern counties interest me. because that's represented by Republican David Volato, and he cast the deciding vote for Trump's big beautiful bill. The big beautiful bill, of course, cut an estimated $1 trillion from Medicaid over the next 10 years, while extending tax cuts for the super wealthy. So everything about it was unfair. It's the kind of point that should be hammered home by both Democratic opponents. This vote was a vote of betrayal against the American people.
Well, it looks like John is frozen there. I don't know, John, if you can maybe refresh your thing while we're getting John back. Sam, you couple times you've mentioned dark money. When did it creep in? How is it just mushroomed to this horrible system? And the other thing I'm interested in also is one of your platforms or one of your ideas for RootsAction is media reform. I'm curious to hear more about how RootsAction is reforming our media. We know that it seems to be very hand in hand with dark money. Could you explain those couple things while we wait for John to come back?
Sure. So first, on the dark money front, a Citizens United was the watershed moment for dark money. And that is just spending by outside groups in elections. So groups that are not, either of the campaigns spending to influence the outcome of that election. Citizens United was in 2010, I think. And this was sort of the beginning of this rise in dark money spending. But what we've seen over the last 15 or 16 years is that this has become a much more sophisticated machine, the dark money machine. And what really, for us, what touched off our, a new level of panic about this was that after COVID, after 2020, there was this new influx of groups who were spending in Democratic primaries, which we hadn't really seen before. To some degree, the dark money battle, when it comes to like the national level, especially presidentials, has sort of netted out between Democrats and Republicans. They each have their heavy hitters who are spending millions and millions of dollars. We don't think this is good. We think this is very bad.
Right.
But the weighting is not as out of kilter as it is in the case of a progressive, grassroots-funded campaign running in a Democratic Party against a more corporate-friendly candidate, where we've seen people spending, dark money groups spending, like 10, 15 times what the other campaign is able to muster on ads to support that candidate. And the other thing that concerns us about this is that while the lobby has a particular set of issues, the dark money lobby has a particular set of issues they're concerned about. Take AIPAC, for example, who's concerned about maintaining the open flow of weapons from the U.S. to Israel. They don't run ads and commercials that are about that. They run ads and commercials that are about something completely different, smearing the candidate's, personal record, saying that the candidate wants to raise your taxes or something like that. So not only are they spending huge amounts to influence voters, but they're obfuscating what they're actually in the election to do. They make it seem like, we're deeply concerned about housing issues in this district, right, and this candidate will be bad. But that's not what they're concerned about at all. They're concerned about getting someone who's going to be a compliant, reliable, pro-Israel vote when they get into Congress. So that's our concern when it comes to dark money. I think when you wrap media into it, what we've seen increasingly over the last decade or so is a consolidation of legacy media as internet media has ballooned into a billion different manifestations. You've seen legacy media really consolidate and calcify into a much more conservative reactionary force. This is best crystallized in the Ellison takeover of CBS and the ways that has become, that the network has basically been gutted and turned into something that much more mirrors what a right-wing news outlet would look like. And you see that there's a complete open sort of revolving door between the money that props up big news networks and money that's being spent in elections. These are the same people who own news networks, who give money to candidates who are right wing. And then, then they're talking about those candidates on the air. So this is a total corruption of the purpose of a free, quote, free media, in our view, in, an operating democracy, that you actually have candidates supported by media outlets whose owners have a vested interest in those candidates winning.
Right.
That's really not what the purpose of a free media should be whatsoever. And in some, it's a really terrible indicator for a democracy in general. I mean, this is what we're talking about ultimately, is that these are the kind of things that contribute to what's called democratic backsliding, where you move from a sort of democratic to less democratic society. And I think that that's already in process in this country.
Right. We have John back here, and we'll get him back on the air. It's 45 minutes. We're talking to Sam Rosenthal of RootsAction. If you'd like to ask a question, we've had some great questions from our listeners. 707-923-3911. Sam, are we the only country that has all this dark money? Are there other countries that seem to be in the same boat as we are? It seems like the tail wagging the dog, and seems so unfair to candidates who are really there for real reasons and others who just want to hold power.
That's a good question. I don't know. Again, I need to brush up on my foreign policy bona fides, maybe. But
you mentioned Parliament,
right.
and of course I think of England. But, Are there other countries that are in the same boat as all this dark money is coming in? It seems so creepy and duplicitous and not fair. And then you have the voters who think they're voting for someone, who's speaking truth to power. And we talked about the media reform. I'm just curious about your thoughts on that. And then we'll bring John back in.
Yeah, I think that you've seen in the UK, for example, I don't know all their election spending rules, but you have seen an increasing tendency for the media certainly to act in concert with, again, more reactionary forces in that country, to push out left-wing politicians in particular, and to kind of pursue them out of parliament, so that they're pushing out anyone who seems like they might be a dangerous voice, in their view. There are other places where you've seen coordination. For example, in Hungary, you've seen extensive coordination between the right wing in our country working with the right wing in Hungary. They just were sort of dealt a loss there, but nevertheless, those are the same donor networks that are propping up both of those groups. So there is a kind of international coordination of this organized right-wing money that I think should be concerning to anyone who's watching the way that this is playing out in our country, that this is actually happening all over the world.
So it's 48 minutes past the hour. We have John back, but we also have another phone call. And if you'd like to weigh in, 707-9.
Hello? Hello?
Hello there. Mary, somehow we lost you there for a second. Are you?
Do you have me now?
Let's see. Hang on a second. Let's put this phone call on. Can you hear the phone caller now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Here you go.
Oh, okay. The term dark money references the Supreme Court decision in Citizens United. Is that correct?
Sam?
Yeah, that's right. The spending, outside spending by a group that is not, officially affiliated with the campaign.
Okay.
I see. So Citizens United, which was passed by the Supreme Court, is another one of the damages that occurred in our country to the Constitution. By allowing that to occur, it opened up the gates for money to come in without accountability. They don't have to declare who they are.
Thank you, caller.
And so forth. Hello? Hello? Hello?
Your call. Are you still there, caller?
I'm trying to, but it looks like I get dead spaces and then I hear you.
Okay, go ahead with your question.
So you didn't hear my first question?
Yeah.
About dark money.
Dark money.
Yeah.
So essentially, the public needs to understand just how damaging the Supreme Court is to the democracy at this point in time. And I suspect that people should say the not so Supreme Court. I mean, this is outrageous what's happened in terms of the fact that now dark money or money can come into the country and back a candidate, and you don't have to declare where that money comes from. Was part of the Citizens United decision. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Right. So again, the whole story goes to follow the money. And this is enormous sums of money that come in. And, of course, another Supreme Court decision was they decided that money is free speech, that it's just free speech. So whatever money you spend is okay with them, number two, and that also a corporation is an individual in the court of law, which was another fiction that the Supreme Court decided was okay. So all this damage that's occurred and that's popping up now in our world is the roots of it is the Supreme Court decisions.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carl.
Yeah, you make some good points. Sam, do you want to weigh in on those? Thank you, caller. Those are good questions. Good comments.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just say that we agree with the caller. I agree. RootsAction would agree that the Supreme Court has largely been a reactionary force, especially over the last 10 or 15 years. It's a fundamentally non-democratic body. We would be in favor of significant reforms to the court, including term limits, including increasing the number of justices, and so on. I think that the Democratic Party, or I should say, the Obama administration, there were some strategic missteps there when there was an opportunity to get more liberal justices on the court, but that didn't happen. And now we're saddled with this court that is just really fundamentally at odds with popular opinion in this country.
Right.
And we're seeing the damage it's done. We just saw the gutting of the Voting Rights Act. This is going to have enormous repercussions in the country. The black vote in lots of parts of the Deep South now is being truly jeopardized in a way it hasn't been since the passage of the Voting Rights Act. This is really a dark time, and abortion access is another one that's been just completely gutted by the Supreme Court. So people are going to feel real effects. They will feel real immiseration because of the decisions that this court, which has just become incredibly partisan, has been making. So I agree with the voter that there are a lot of ills stemming from the Supreme Court right now.
Hey, John, we kind of lost you mid-sentence. Did you have another question for Sam?
Yeah. So this is the first time I've ever lost the Zoom connection.
Yeah.
And one of these days, maybe it's because I'm in Palm Beach, which is Trump's real home. And one of these days, I expect a knock on the door and guys in black suits asking me to come with them.
Take you away.
So I just wanted to give, I want to call this segment of the show the Donald Trump Watch. And I just want to talk a little bit about his most recent visit here. It was on May 1st. He visited the Villages, which is a retirement community of 88,000 spread over 300 counties. And it was the MAGA loyalists. It was like a clown show. I never realized there was so many Trump outfits in my life, and anyone that wants to see some of the photographs I took can go right to my Facebook page and check that out. But the real meat and potatoes was later that night at the Forum Club at the Kravitz Center in West Palm Beach, and this was by invitation only to 600 people. Probably 600 of the richest people in the United States. No question about it. And there's no question about it that the Palm Beach area, what Trump now calls the semi-Palm Beach of Palm Beach, West Palm Beach, and Palm Beach Gardens, will be the new epicenter of new American wealth going forward. And by that, I mean financial engineering, AI, cryptocurrencies, blockchain, quantum computing, It's all happening right here. I did not know this before I moved here. It's all happening in Palm Beach. Real estate values, you could buy anything here. You could buy a parking space here, and it will double in value over the next 5 years. This place is booming, and the Trump family is putting down their roots right here. Trump and all his children are starting businesses, and they're cashing in like nobody's business. So Trump spoke here at the forum, and then on the 3rd, he was at the Cadillac Golf Championship at the Trump National Doral, Miami, the Doral Country Club, and he spoke again there. It's clear this is where the money is moving. It's clear this is where the money will come from, the dark money, the PAC money, all the special interest money. So smart guys like Sam really need to do a deep dive into what's going on here in Palm Beach. And I've seen it with my own eyes.
Yeah. Sam, do you want to respond to that? We have about 2 minutes left.
Yeah, I haven't had the pleasure of, being that proximal to Trump world. John, that sounds like an exciting opportunity, but I agree that it seems like that is the actual basis of political power right now in the country, and that it is completely shot through with the MAGA aesthetic. It's a sort of exercise in the wealthy, congratulating themselves on their consolidation of power under Trump. And I'm sure that most Americans would be horrified to, witness what this whole political movement has actually been about.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Sam, we have about 2 minutes or so. We'd like to plug in people to what you're about, how they might become involved. So in the last few minutes, if you could share that with our listeners, that would be very helpful.
Sure. You can go to RootsAction.org is our website. You can see some of the petitions we have there. I'd point folks particularly to our DNC autopsy petition right now. You can encourage the DNC to release its autopsy. Also, you have DNC members that are in your state that are acting as representatives of Democratic voters in their state. You can reach out to those people and you can tell them that you are a voter in the Democratic Party. If you are, you might not be, but if you are, that you're a voter in the Democratic Party and that you think we should see this autopsy and you think that its contents are important. These are people who are not used to being lobbied, contrary your Congress people, your representatives. These are people who don't get a lot of calls and emails. So if you're able to contact them, if you know them, if you're able to find their phone number or email address, you should reach out and tell them nicely that you think this is important. And you can go to our website, again, rootsaction.org, for more information on that.
Super. Sam, it's been terrific to have you on the program. Please keep us informed as developments occur. Again, it's rootsaction.org. We've been speaking with Sam Rosenthal, who is the political director of RootsAction. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, Sam, thank you. And say hi to Norman Solomon. And again, as I end my show, always with the same plea. If you enjoy the show, if you enjoy these guests, please become a member of KMUD Radio. This is your community station. Very small staff who are much overworked and underpaid. Our engineer is compliments to the station. We appreciate everything the station is doing for us. Apparently, we're getting a podcast out of this as well. If you support this show, this radio station, please become a member. Thank you.
It's the war racket. That's the war racket. That's the war racket. That's the war racket.